All right, hi everybody, John Meadows here. Specifically today, I want to give you 5 tips on how you can gain muscle as a natural. We just did a video on how you can very efficiently lose body fat as a natural and what are some of the things you need to do, 5 tips there. You're going to notice some parallels here. You're going to hear me talking about a lot of the same things, but a little differently. So for instance, tip number 1, if you remember when I talked about losing weight, I said you have to do what? You have to track calories. You have to know how much you're eating or you can't create a deficit. The same is true if you're trying to gain muscle. Now, you're not in this constant ramped up state of protein synthesis that the guys have that are enhanced. So you have to be precise. You have to know how many calories you're at so that you can create a surplus. Because in order for you to gain muscle, for most of you, you need to be in a surplus. You know, you can have the discussion, can you gain muscle while you're in a deficit? And the answer is it's going to be incredibly difficult for a natural, and it's going to be incredibly difficult for a natural who has experience. Maybe as a beginner, yes, but the longer you go, the harder that's going to be, particularly as a natural. So you need to track your calories. Now, how big does the surplus need to be? I don't think it needs to be as big as a lot of people claim. I think 300 or 400 calories a day is a pretty good surplus. So if you find that your total energy expenditure is X and it requires you 2,500 calories to stay at your current level, bump it up to 2,800 calories, 2,900 calories for males, and there's probably half that for females. Not that the rule is different, it's just females generally weigh less. So that's number 1. It's very basic, it's very fundamental, but you have to be very precise. So track your calories. Tip number 2 is your training intensity. We talked about that last time as well, for when you want to lose body fat, how you have to preserve your training and make sure it's still intense so you don't lose your muscle. Well, now the situation is a little different. Now you're more fed, you're in a surplus. So now you can really unleash when you're training intensity. Now, I think a lot of natural trainees make the mistake of saying, well, I'm not enhanced, so I can't train as hard. That's a very bad idea. You may not be able to recover as fast, but you still need to train hard. And the further you get towards your genetic potential, actually the harder you have to train, because if you keep giving your body the exact same stimulus and it's not enough over and over and over and over, you're really not going to get any better. So we need your training to be very intense. Now, what does that mean? Well, we're all a little different. So I'm just going to throw out some general guidelines and then you would kind of tailor them to your own body. But generally speaking, I think when you train, let's say you do 3 or 4 exercises for a body part. I want to see your last exercise go to complete failure. That means you cannot do another rep with good form. It doesn't mean leave a rep in the tank or 2 reps in the tank. It means go until you cannot do another rep with good form. Notice I only said the last set. If you do 4 exercises, and let's say you do 3 sets, if you did them all like this, there'll be 12 sets to failure. You cannot handle that kind of intensity and volume as a natural. But you probably can handle it if you're just doing the last set. So if you did 4 exercises, we're talking 4 sets. Now, you may even want to sprinkle in some high-intensity techniques for 1 or 2 of those sets, which means once you hit failure, maybe do a drop set, maybe do some partials to really, really push your body. I am 100% convinced, whether you're natural or not natural, you have to really push your body. Your body doesn't want to accumulate a lot of muscle. It's not natural for it. So you're going to have to really push. The difference is you're just probably not going to be able to handle quite as many sets, okay? So make sure your training intensity is high. Okay, number 3, it's also revolves around training, and it's your frequency. Everybody has these ideas. Well, you should train a muscle once a week, or you should do it twice a week, or you should do it 3 times a week, or you should just train your whole body every day. Listen, training frequency comes down to one thing: recovery. You do not train a muscle, again, if it's not recovered. And if it is recovered, you don't wait another 3 or 4 days to train it. So you have to be really in tune with your recovery. So people will ask me, what do you mean when your muscle's recovered? Well, number 1, it's not sore. If you train your legs on Monday and then you want to train them again on Thursday, but they're really sore, you're not going to have a good session. And I could get into the science of muscle fibers not producing force because they're damaged and all that, but I'll just spare you the detail and say that your workouts are not going to be productive if you're training sore muscles. Okay, there's a difference between doing a little cardio to get some blood going versus training really hard. I want your sessions to be very, very intense, to my earlier point, to point number 2. So when you think about your training frequency, I want you to train the muscle when it's recovered. All right. Now you may have to get a little bit creative with your split because some body parts you may have found get sore than others. So let's say your legs get sore for 3 days, but your back only gets sore for 1 day. So maybe once you've got past that 48 hours for your back, you can train it again. But for your legs, maybe 48 hours is too soon. Maybe you need an extra day. Maybe you need an extra 2 days beyond that. So you have to be a little creative. Now, not only that, now you got to think about if you're prioritizing anything. Let's say you have one body part that's really behind. So let's say you pretty much feel recovered, everything feels recovered. So then you go, well, what do I do? Well, that's when the body parts you need to prioritize get hit first. If everything's recovered, but your legs are lacking, then do your legs next. Don't do your chest and then do your legs. So make sure the body part is recovered. And then when you have any questions as to what's recovered the most, if everything feels good, train the body part that needs the most priority. This will create a training style that will give you more balance overall too. So that'd be tip number 3. Tip number 4, NEAT. We talked about that when we were talking about getting lean and how it's important to keep active because it's such a big component of your total energy expenditure for the day. Well, you want to actually do the opposite if you're trying to gain a lot of weight. I'm not saying sit on your couch all the time, but what I am saying is if you're out playing basketball all the time, if you're just moving constantly, if you're constantly busy, if you never rest, you're making it a little bit harder on yourself because you're burning so many calories. Because remember that NEAT can be, somewhere around 15% of your total energy expenditure. So, hey man, just slow down, relax a little, slow down, don't stress. And I think that's going to help you. And number 5, recovery. Again, I mentioned it earlier, you don't have the ramped up protein synthesis that seems to be daily, all week, all month, from the additional help that some people get. As a natural, you don't have that. So you've got to really focus on recovery. Now, you've heard me talk about sleep. You know you need your 8 hours of sleep, maybe even a half-hour nap during the day. You've heard me talk about intra-workout nutrition and how when you consume amino acids and carbohydrates while you train, it helps manage muscle protein breakdown and will help you recover much better. You've probably heard me talk about that. The other thing I would add to that is I think something we overlook is stress. So if you can manage your stress that's in your life, think about stress. Think about times when you've been really stressed out. You lose muscle, you get weaker, your cortisol levels are up really high. Stress can just really, really tear a body apart, particularly a natural one. So I need you to kind of work on your mindset that you're not going to get stressed out. I need you to think about all those things that are bothering you. Think about, is it really a big deal? Is it going to matter a month from now? Is it going to matter 2 months from now? Chances are the things that are bothering you, maybe they're not really that big of a deal. Now, maybe you do have some big deals, so I don't want to make light of those. But what I do want you to understand is just manage your stress better. Don't stress out about everything. And I know for some people that's hard because we're type A's and type B's, type 1, type 2, whatever you call it, personalities. But I would just encourage you, you're going to make it really hard to build muscle if you're constantly stressed. And I have seen this with a lot of people. Stress impacts their digestion, it impacts their strength. Again, their cortisol levels are always really high. So their insulin sensitivity starts to get a little wacky. So that's one that I really want to impress upon the importance of today in these 5 tips. So anyways, that's my 5 tips. If you can nail every one of these, I think you're going to be in good shape and I think you're going to keep progressing. I appreciate your watching, appreciate all the support, and looking forward to a great 2020 with y'all. I'm going to give you a bonus tip number 6. This is something I've used with a lot of people in the past. Your last meal of the night, I want you to have a meal that really sticks with you. Sometimes people, when they're natural, I literally feel like overnight, they don't lose their muscle overnight, but it almost feels like they do. So I want you to have grass-fed lean steak and eggs before you go to bed. Maybe it's 3 ounces of steak and maybe it's 2 or 3 whole eggs. But I want you to put a good, high-quality protein in your body that sticks with you through the night. I want that to be your last meal. And then when you wake up, you won't be starving. You'll feel real good. That's a little trick I think you're actually going to enjoy.